Well, I think it is a historic decision on a couple counts. First off, it's the first time where a state has stood up for the protection of its citizens against the presidency of Donald Trump. I suspect you will see many of these occasions, given the unpredictable and non-planned way of doing business out of the White House right now. Second, obviously, it is a perfect example of the checks and balances at work in our great democracy. And it was very important for our state to stand up against President Trump here because this was an obvious injury to the immigrants, to the students who are in our colleges, to the interpreters, to many people. I stood next to a citizen while she was weeping because her husband, she's an American citizen, and the president prevented her husband to get off the plane from Vienna to come see her. Very, very great trauma individually. But it was important for the state to act here because it was actually an insult to all 7 million Washingtonians in a variety of ways. It hurt our economy. We have really successful companies here selling great products, Amazon, Expedia, all around the world. This prevents them from doing the business that they need to. Their salespeople can't go around to sell their technologies in these companies. We're a state that embraces our military personnel. We have folks in the field right now from our state who are fighting, literally almost in foxholes with Muslims against terrorism. And this was a kind of a recruiting poster for ISIS because it helped them sort of say America somehow degraded the Muslim religion. So this decision by the court, which will not allow religious intolerance to stand, which stopped the first religious test ever tried in American history, which brought some rational decision-making against a ban that did not comport with common sense. The court, I think, pointed out that there hasn't been a single refugee since 9/11 that's been involved in a fatal attack from any of these 7 countries, and it made no sense. This president banned travel from the countries that did not attack us on September 11th and allowed travel from the countries that did. So for multiple reasons, I feel glad that we have a federal court. Bob Ferguson, our Attorney General, did a great job, and I'm glad the Constitution's alive and kicking in the state of Washington.
Governor, I want to get your reaction to a statement that we just received from New York Senator Chuck Schumer, who's also the minority leader in the United States Senate. He says the ruling is a victory for the Constitution and for all of us who believe this un-American executive order will not make us safer. President Trump should heed this ruling, and he ought to back off and repeal the executive order once and for all. Your reaction, sir?
Well, I think it's consistent with the Constitution. It's also consistent with the deepest values of Americans. We've seen millions of Americans marching, expressing their First Amendment right to say we ought to stick true to the values of tolerance and openness that have served us so well for 200 years. And that statute in Chuck's Harbor is just as bright in Elliott Bay in Seattle as it is in New York Harbor, and we should not allow it to be dim. And you bet this president should obviously honor the import. Clearly, he's got to honor the federal court. We cannot allow him to ignore the Constitution or the decision of the federal courts. We will expect him to rapidly recognize his full recognition of this court order. We will expect nothing less. It's the right thing. I would love him to himself unilaterally rethink this. This is obviously a very rash executive action. They didn't ask their cabinet members. The people at Seattle International Airport, I went right down to the airport when I heard about this to try to help these families. Customs hadn't been given any guidance on this. This was an act by an unpredictable executive branch that was rash, misguided, unplanned, and chaos is not what we need in this country. So I'm really appreciative of the federal courts tonight. This was a federal judge who was appointed by President George W. Bush and very forcefully made a very rapid decision that this is likely to prevail on the merits long term.
Governor Inslee, is it your position, sir, then, that because For the millions of people who voted for Donald Trump, who supported what he called on the campaign trail, his plan to extreme vet people who were coming from countries that he felt posed a threat to the United States, that he wanted to keep Americans safe. Is it your position that the executive order probably was not formulated in the right way, but that you do support the president's ideas when it comes to trying to keep Americans safe?
Well, obviously we want to keep America safe. That's one of the reasons why I reject his entire effort to, in one way or another, ban Muslims, which he said he was going to do from the country during his campaign. Obviously we want to keep America safe. That's one of the reasons I'm against this executive order. I do believe it exposes us to greater risk because it helps ISIS promote the idea that America is an anti-Muslim country, and that message is a recruiting poster for ISIS. So I don't think the direction he wants to go increases our national security. Now, yes, there might be things that are appropriate in reviewing information that anyone has when we vet them, but we already have an extensive vetting system. And by the way, this is just a thinly disguised effort to impose a religious test, and I'll tell you why. And this came up during the hearing, obviously. What the president's executive order did on a permanent basis, not a temporary basis, on a permanent basis, it basically said that Muslims have to go to the back of the bus. They go to the end of the line when it comes time to win some of these precious limited spots to become a refugee. And it said other religions can get ahead of Muslims. That is not the way. Telling any religion to go to the back of the bus of any nature is very un-American. It is clearly unconstitutional, and it will not stand. It's just it tears at the fabric of who we are as a nation. So no, the thrust of his effort was unconstitutional at the beginning, at the middle, and it's unconstitutional at the end.
Governor, for our viewers who may be scratching their heads and sort of wondering how is it, because Washington was the first state to sue the government over this executive order, understanding obviously that this is a federal court that has halted this immigration action, can you just briefly explain to our viewers how it is that it can happen in Washington and have effect nationwide and in fact globally?
Well, federal courts are federal judges, and they have their decisions can have impact, as this decision is tonight. It is a decision by the federal judicial system, and the federal judicial system operates in all 50 states. And so the federal decision tonight is expressed through this federal court. It's not the first time that this has happened, that federal judges have made nationwide decisions. And we have to have people who will make decisions for the country. And this is the way that this system works. And I think what we've seen so far, there have been multiple federal judges who in some form or other have expressed great doubt about the constitutionality of this. This is the first one where a state has stood up for the rights of its citizens. And again, this federal judge didn't stand up just for immigrants, and I think this is an important point. All Americans have an interest in not allowing religious intolerance. All Americans have an interest in having a president who will not go off half-cocked in an unplanned, chaotic implementation of a rule that does not actually enhance our national security. So having a federal judge who will take action in an appropriate way, and I think that's what happened here tonight, is the right thing to do, and I'm glad we have a federal court system that can stand up to a rogue executive that has not acted in the best interest of this country.
You believe that President Trump is a rogue executive, sir?
I'll leave people to their own judgment, but I believe rogue is not too far off, and I'll tell you why. This is a president who stopped the free flow of people who had been properly vetted, properly given visa, allowed to take off in airplanes, were 6 feet away from greeting this American citizen that I represent here in the state of Washington, and never picked up the phone and talked to his cabinet members about the ramifications of this decision. This was a decision made by amateur politicians and political operatives without consideration of the real-life consequences of this action. And that rashness, that lack of planning, led to huge chaos. And if we keep saying that, the president will continue to see these lawsuits, and I hope he will have a little better planning system in the future.
And finally, sir, you tweeted out, we should feel heartened by today's victory and more resolute than ever that we are fighting on the right side of history. There is still more to do. The fight isn't yet won. Massachusetts had a ruling earlier today. It's somewhat different from the ruling in Washington. Can we expect then to see, sir, different judges in different states having a variety of different rulings that might somehow muddy the waters going forward?
It would not be shocking. There are different federal judges. They have different views. It would not be shocking if further appellate courts have a resolution of this at some point. But I will just tell you, in looking at this, when a president tries to pick one religion over another, and it doesn't matter religion, what religion it is, there is no way under our constitutional system that we ought to allow a government or a president to decide which religion he likes best. And if you want to know the groups who understand that, the very first group that was at Seattle International Airport to protest this action was a Jewish family with 3 young Jewish boys. They understand what happens when you don't respect refugees due to their particular religion. We saw that when we didn't give Anne Frank a passport. We saw that when we didn't let the St. Louis in with Jewish refugees who we turned away, and they eventually were exterminated in the camps of Germany and Poland. And that's not who we are as a people. So we're going to continue this. I'd be very appreciative if the president could rethink this. I hope he would talk to his cabinet members, and I hope we have a better situation in the future.
Washington Governor Jay Inslee, sir, thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.